Greetings from Seattle, Washington, in the great Pacific Northwest. I'm Jason Rigden, and you are listening to the Podcast of Mystery, the show that always leaves you with more questions than answers, the podcast where I talk with extraordinary guests about the paranormal, the strange, and the unknown. On this episode, we will be talking to the host of the Creepypasta YouTube channel, Slaughterhouse Stories. If you're looking for a quick dose of horror, check out this channel. Go to YouTube and search for Slaughterhouse Stories right now. But first, I just want to ask you to send me your suggestions for guests. This is an interview program, so I depend on finding interesting guests. You can help me with that by suggesting guests and topics for future episodes of the Podcast of Mystery. You can do this by emailing me at podofmystery@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your suggestions, and don't be afraid of suggesting yourself as a guest. Once again, please send me your suggestions for future guests and topics to podofmystery@gmail.com. I really want to know what you want to hear, and I'll do my best to bring those voices to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gus Train. I am the host and narrator of the Slaughterhouse Stories podcast and YouTube channel. I wanted to come on Pod of Mystery because it's a show I really enjoy, and it's my first opportunity to actually be interviewed for anything that I've done. So that was really exciting to me, and anything to kind of get myself out there and join in with the podcast community is just going to benefit me and everybody else.
Yeah, so could you tell us a little bit about, what kind of topics you cover in, it's a YouTube channel and a podcast, right?
Right. Well, it's a narration channel, really. It's I narrate creepypastas, short scary stories, the more like horror themed poetry, like Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft has been done. And I narrate the stories. I've written a fair few of them as well, and it's just something fun to do because I've always wanted to do voiceover work, but like my voice isn't that talented. Like I couldn't go into full on announcer voice, and like it's not as like you have a very resonant voice. Mine's not as resonant as that. So it was just something fun that my son approached me with, and I just started doing the narrations, and I used to do it on like a little headphone, like a phone microphone. So the quality used to be really bad, but now it's getting better and better.
And just in case our listeners don't know, what is a creepypasta?
Well, basically, a creepypasta is a short, scary story, but the internet kind of gave it a new name. But it's essentially the same thing. Like Slender Man is one of the more well-known creepypastas. It started on the internet and ballooned into a thing. I mean, and some of them are people kind of believe him a little too much. Like the Slender Man. Like he had two girls that stabbed one of their best friends because they said the Slender Man told them to, which is a tragic side of it. But it shows how powerful these creepypastas can be to, kind of the unhinged people. But it's just short, scary stories that, like if back when in the 90s when I would look on the internet for scary stories, they were just scary stories, but they're creepypastas.
And have you always been kind of into horror?
Yeah, I was pretty much raised on horror from like the time I was 5. I was watching Tales from the Crypt, Bela Lugosi's Dracula, all the Universal monster movies, Wolfman, Frankenstein, and then just expanded from there.
And then at what point did you decide you wanted to kind of do this show, like, and get all the equipment together, or however you assembled it?
Well, about a year ago, actually yesterday was the 1 year anniversary of my YouTube channel.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Little few days before that, my oldest son came up to me and said he had tried to get me to do it before because he was really inspired by Mr. Nightmare and Creepy McPasta. Like there's really well-known creepypasta narrators out there. And it was something he wanted to do for his channel. He kind of flip-flops like what he would want to do for his channel all the time. Like he wanted to do that a few years ago. Then he wanted to be a gaming channel. And then last year came back to, hey, would you narrate scary stories for me? And I said, sure. And at first it was just like, I'll just do this thing for my son, And then as the channel got a little bit more popular, it's still small. It's like 300 subscribers. But I was like, I should really put like time, effort, and like real energy into doing this, especially when I started writing stories for it. I was like, well, if I'm going to put my own stuff out there, I gotta use a better microphone than something I used to talk on the phone. And then editing, like once I could start hearing like mouth clicks and stuff, editing became important to me. So that's when I downloaded Audacity and I was like, I'm going to do this full on.
Well, it's really amazing, right now that, we can have these ideas of these shows and we have the ability to actually make them. You turn back the clock to like the 70s, you just couldn't do that. You wouldn't be able to reach the audience. You wouldn't have the equipment, or at least the equipment would be way too expensive.
Right. Yeah. So unless you were like a radio DJ or on TV or something, you didn't have a voice. You didn't have a way to, be creative outside of the main entertainment industry.
Yeah, your options I think were pretty much, you could do things live, but that was pretty much it. And doing something like you're doing, that might work, but it's going to be so limited, to get the people in the room
And in the 70s and 80s, if you're standing on a street corner telling scary stories, they're gonna lock you up for being a Satanist or something.
So you said that some of these stories you've written, have you always been writing kind of horror short stories?
Well, I started off my writing thing as writing poetry. I got into it when I was like 15 and I was in high school, but I think which is what everyone does. And I got really into Edgar Allan Poe. And then once you get away from his poetry, you find that he was like the creator of the detective horror genre and all these these short stories he had. And so that became an inspiration. In fact, I even kind of ripped off of the Telltale Heart for a summer school writing project. I mean, I got an A, but I was like, I stole the idea.
So then with the rest of the creepypasta, so this is for the things you haven't actually written, you're going and you're finding stuff that already exists, some of the stuff that's just kind of exists on the internet. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. So there's not like a book.
Well, one of the more well-known creepypasta people, I can't remember. I think it's Creepy McPasta. He actually put a book out about it with creepypastas that you collected from the internet. But no, in general, I find mine from the internet. In fact, there's a website that I use mostly. It's called creepypasta.fandom.com. So it's like a wiki page, and there's just tons of them there, thousands of them there. So there's a lot to choose from. And then Reddit is a good place for it. But a lot of times when you're doing somebody else's story, like when you do it from the website, typically it's like you're allowed to do this, but you should still kind of ask because you are using someone else's work. And they technically agree to you being allowed to narrate their stuff when they post their thing on the website. But I think it's common courtesy. I think it's just good manners to ask somebody to, hey, is it okay if I use your work to promote myself, basically?
So there's all these stories out there. Kind of what criteria do you use to decide which ones to actually turn into videos or episodes?
Well, I like to go through, there's different genres. So I'll like every week on my YouTube channel, there'll be, and on my podcast, there'll be poetry. So I always find some poems, but they got to be good. They can't just be like, the scary frog sat on a log and died, and that's it. Like it got to be good and engaging. And the stories I go through different genres. Like I like to hit like a doll story, like at least once or twice a month because I do a feature on the podcast with dolls. Same with clowns. I like to find ghost stories, cryptids. My main thing though is if I'm reading it and I go like I get like a chill, I'm like, this is one. This is one of the ones. Now it doesn't happen all the time like that. Sometimes I'll just read it and I'll just like the way it sounds. And I'm like, this is cool. But if it scares me while I'm reading it or while I'm narrating it, I'm like, this is the one.
Do you have any idea of maybe like what your ratio is of stories that you're reading to maybe do an episode about, and the ones that are actually successful, where this one gives you the feels?
Honestly, I think because of the fact that I was raised on horror, it's not that big a ratio. But I mean, it's been like at least I'll say like a dozen or so that have. But when you look at like I have 200 and something videos, so it's not that big a ratio. But when they hit, I'm like, ooh.
Have any of these stories that you've come across, that you do have that feeling maybe, but maybe they cross some kind of line? Do you have any kind of rules about the content you include?
I won't include anything, and not that I've ever come across it, but anything that has anything to do with sexual with children, I won't do. Kill a child, that's fine. That's scary. I'm a parent, so that is very scary. But like that, or if I read a story and there's a racial slur in it, I'm not going to do it. Not just because I don't think that way, but also because to do the story and take it out takes it away from the work, So I prefer just not to use it because I refuse to let myself say anything, even for a story. But that's really it. Just no racism and nothing sexual about children, and I'm good. I guess I guess actually, let me go back on that. I guess it's technically not true. There was a story I did about a doll, but it wasn't out and out sexual abuse, but it was kind of alluded to, and that's actually what made it spooky. But anything that goes really deep into it, I try to
Yeah.
avoid. Just it's just
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
And so then you're not modifying these stories. Are you reading them kind of verbatim?
Yes. Sometimes, because some stories, the writer may not be a native English speaker, or sometimes it happens when I write. You're so excited about what you're writing, you're kind of rushing through it. You don't read it, and then it's like some of these things didn't really flow well together, like jumbled words, or just using a word too quickly in succession with the same word, like things like that. And I'll modify it a little bit, but nothing drastic.
How are the writers reacting? You said you maybe contact them and tell them you're going to be doing an episode based on one of their stories. How do they react? It seems to me like that's almost like an award into itself.
Yeah, some of them really really enjoy the fact that you want to do their story. Like it's a point of pride. Like there's just some one writer, her name's Jay Deshen, and I've done a lot of her stories. And she'll usually pop up on my YouTube channel when I've done it and compliment me on my story, and she'll post it on her page in that creepypasta site. She'll post all the different narrations. So she really loves it when people narrate her work. Other people, they tell you no, they don't want it. A lot of times that's because they narrate themselves, so they want to make sure they're getting the attention, which that's respectable. If you're doing the work and you want to narrate it too, you should have full reign.
So some people do say no, even though it would give them kind of more exposure potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it makes sense. You want to promote yourself and do it yourself. I can respect that. I may not like it at the time. I may be like really annoyed, but I respect it.
And so one thing about these stories is well, let's see, trying to think of how to describe this. I had a wording for it. These stories present themselves as being true, but they're not. There's a bit of a wink and a nod.
Yeah. There's definitely a wink and a nod. And some will outright say, oh well, I've tried writing this for the first time. But mostly it's like no matter how fantastical it is, whether it's zombies or creatures, it's written under the assumption that it's real. Which most horror things are really, because it brings in that scare factor.
Especially I feel like older, more classic horror stuff very much had a lot of those stories of the first person kind of narrative as if this was a real story.
Exactly. They're basically like the Blair Witch of the internet.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Do you ever worry about people maybe getting confused and thinking these stories are real?
Not until just this moment. So thank you.
Oh no. I'm so sorry.
I think with anything that's artistic, I guess, God, I'm going to sound like a ego maniacal person. Anything that's artistic, you can't really worry about how other people are going to react too much. Like I want someone to listen to my stuff and get scared, for sure. I don't want them to stab their friend because they think I told them Slender Man told them to. But it's kind of like when Judas Priest had to put up with all the allegations that they had what is it, subliminal messages in their stuff. Ozzy Osbourne had to do it. Like that could derail an artist if they focused on just, oh, these people, the Columbine shooters were into heavy metal, or this person killed himself or killed his family all because of heavy metal. You can't let yourself be blamed for the mental illness of somebody that's listening. It's tragic and it sucks, but it's not your fault.
And despite the fact that there's that kind of, it's presented as being real, there is that wink and a nudge where if you have the greater context, you understand that it's not real.
Yeah. I mean, everybody after a certain age, unless you're mentally ill, should know like there's no man with no face in a suit coming to get you from the woods. Like I stopped believing in Dracula when I was 8 years old. So it unless something's wrong upstairs, you're generally going to know this isn't real. Now, there are stories you can find on Reddit of real encounters that are creepy, like stalkerish or things like that. And I've delved into them before. So they're out there, but the more fantastical things, it's like, come on, you know.
Well, that's interesting. So you've told stories of things that were supposed to be true. How did you present that to the audience? Did you present it just as another normal episode?
Yeah, I would just, it's still technically a narration. I'm retelling somebody else's story. This story just happens to be true. And you know, it's like there was this woman that was like followed around by like these three men in Target for like an hour. Like she just kept trying, and she was going towards the parking lot, and the Target manager actually walked out with her because she was so scared. And like right behind her car was their parked van, and they'd walked to it as the manager was sitting there talking to her. So it's like that supposedly happened in real life, and is more terrifying than anything else I could tell.
One thing that's really fascinating about some of these, this style of stories is just the viral nature of it. We live in this world of like kind of intellectual property where I own that character, but in the creepypastas, you'll see stories evolve and characters maybe characters, quote unquote, appear in different stories written by different people.
Yeah, for sure. Like in the last night's podcast that just came out, I did a story, and it's part of the Slenderman universe. It talks about Slenderman, not necessarily naming him, but through the description, you know who it is, and that's not by the original creators of Slenderman, but it's kind of like a wink and a nod, like we know you just wanted to add to the universe, Whereas like if you tried to add to the Harry Potter universe, J.K. might be a little upset.
So in any of your writings, do you build on kind of established corners of this universe, or do you build things wholly original?
I build things wholly original only because I don't want to step on other people's toes creatively. Like I don't want to. I'm pretty confident in my writings. Like it's probably a little too much, really. But like I don't want to be like write a Slender Man story, and then if someone's like, "Oh, this is complete trash," then I'm just gonna focus on it. So it's like that I've like messed up this part of a universe, or conversely be like, I just improved it. Look how great I am, and just really feel like a d-bag.
So, how long have you been doing this? Did you say it was a year?
Yeah, it's been a year that I've been doing the narrations. I started with the YouTube channel last year, and then it's only been since January of this year that I started the podcast.
And how many episodes do you think you've produced since then?
Yesterday's was the 13th episode of the podcast, and well, just give me a second, I can look how many videos I have. Oh, it's like 200 and something.
Wow. Yeah. So, doing this many episodes, you must have learned quite a bit. Do you have any tips for people who might be thinking about doing maybe not the same kind of thing with creepypasta, but maybe the same sort of kind of narration and telling stories?
Find your voice. Like, don't try to sound like somebody else. And one thing that I notice when I listen to other not everybody, but some of the other narrators, is they tend to like read really fast. Like they don't put a lot of space. And I'm not just talking about like space between sentences, but like pause for effect or for suspense. Like there's some people that just don't, and then as we were walking through the woods, and it's like, just slow down. You'll be so much scarier if you just slow down. And please get a good mic. I know from experience, if you don't have the good mic, it's rough.
And also, I think before we started talking, we talked a little bit about perfectionism. With that amount of content, you seem to be fairly good about kind of getting past that kind of perfectionist tendency to hold content back. Do you have any tips about that?
Well, I'd say the thing is I take a while to edit the videos because of wanting to make it as, like, if there's a click my mouth makes or like one of those wet noises, anything like that, like I got to get rid of it. Like you don't even ever hear me breathe on the stories. So anyone that's listening to this, that's listened to my channel, this will be the first time they've ever heard me take a breath. Um, but there's other people that they don't mind. There's breathing, there's mouth clicks that they don't care. So really, I'm just being obsessive about it. So you got to not cling to it. I mean, it's different if it's like a massive flub, but mouth clicks are, see, my mouth just clicked. Mouth clicks are fine. You just got to get past them like I cannot.
Yeah. So would you tell the audience maybe just briefly just about some of your favorite episodes? Give them a little taste, a little free sample before they subscribe, just like the trailer.
Well, I have one story that character my kid came up with, and the character's name is Mr. Cindy. And he came up with it and he kind of drew it. And I wrote a story around it. And I really enjoyed it. I think that was the first original story I wrote for the channel. And the writing went well for it. And my son had found on YouTube royalty-free music that really just fit with the story that I still use when I bring that character up again. That music comes through. So that one's special. And it was like the kickoff point to a shared universe that I'm writing. It's called Newcastle Chronicles. So that Dimples the Clown is another one, just because I don't narrate that like I normally would. I actually go into like a clown character, complete with like a creepy laugh and then a big maniacal laugh at the end, and that was just fun. Girl on West Kalen, which just came out a few days ago, was fun because it was like it's in the same universe, but this guy's not, he's not a ghost, and he's just a really demented like stalker. So it just brings a whole different creep factor.
Why do you think people are so attracted to horror? I'm always perplexed by it because, on its face, no one should like this stuff, but we all do.
Yeah, it's, if you're in real life and someone pulls a gun on you and you get scared, you don't go, ooh, like, but for some reason, stories, YouTube videos, movies, TV shows, like, if it's scary, people just eat it up. And it's just the adrenaline rush because you're scared, but you're safe. Whatever's on the TV or on the computer, it's not actually going to reach out, hopefully, and hurt you. And I think just the safety in the adrenaline rush, it's like going on a roller coaster. You're not going to die usually, but it's scary.
There's also this strange kind of after effect. I remember, Slender Man kind of affecting me and almost being afraid of dark corners. And, the classic one is, Jaws, right? Where people, you see Jaws and then you're a little bit afraid of going in that water.
Ever since Jaws, people have a really odd view of sharks. Like they just think sharks are just out there roaming around like, yo, step in, I'm hungry.
You mentioned your son helping you a bit. That seems kind of unique for a lot of creators. It's actually having like a real family kind of project.
Yeah, it really is. He started the channel and he's been into horror. He got into horror around the same time that I did when I was a kid. Granted, there's certain parts of movies it's like, hey, cover your eyes. Not so much now. He's almost 13. But yeah, he's always been into horror. His brother's been into horror. He on my podcast, I do it through Anchor. So there's like ads you can do for Anchor, and he's in the ad for Anchor, like kind of as my producer. Another story that's close to my heart is a story called The Candy Myth, and my youngest son actually narrates half of that.
That's got to be interesting for them to have a father that's so into kind of this kind of strange horror kind of storytelling stuff.
Yeah, you'd think it would feel strange for them, but they actually like my oldest, he discovered horror on his own. Like it's not something I was like, here, sit down and watch Freddy Krueger. I was just sitting there one day, and he started talking. I don't know if it was Freddy or like one, but it was definitely one of the slashers. And he's like, have you ever heard it? I'm like, first of all, how do you know about it? And he's like, well, I looked it up on YouTube. I'm like, of course you did. I'm like, well, yeah, I've seen these movies and blah, blah. So, well, could I watch the actual movie instead of just like clips? Because I watched all the kills. I'm like, all the kills? I'm like, you're 7. He's like, yeah, they're really good. I'm like, I'm worried about you. But yes, we can watch the movies together. And then his brother, it's like we're just a group. We're the buddies. we do everything together. So he joined in and he got into the movies too.
Wow, that's really great. So maybe then I should ask you, what are some of your favorite horror movies, either classic or current?
For like this time period, Insidious movies are really good. Like that first Insidious movie, like legit scared me. The first Conjuring movie, like they had hands that came out of the dark and clapped. I'm like, F that. Um, Paranormal Activity really scared me. The first one, I actually watched it at work, and it was all dark in work. And you had this moment where like the haunting like actually screamed and then banged on something. And I'm like, it messed me up the rest of the day at work. Um, so those are the more recent ones. A lot of Rob Zombie stuff. Not his Halloween series, mainly because Halloween is my all-time favorite. Everything about that is like perfect for me as a horror movie. The bad guy is a bad guy, and there's no sympathy, there's no reason, there's no backstory. It's just he was like this as a kid, and he's like this now. And oh, Jamie Lee Curtis, her name escaped me. Jamie Lee Curtis is she's perfect as a final girl. She's not like she's not a badass that can like fight him off in a traditional sense, but just through being smart and trying to remain calm, she got through everything. And then Bram Stoker's Dracula I loved. And then really just the Tales from the Crypt series. Every episode is pure horror comedy.
And are there any kind of YouTube channels or podcasts doing kind of horror that you like? I know there's the popularity of kind of horror podcasts of like ongoing stories is huge right now.
Yeah. We got the big ones. Creepypasta, his channel is always like gigantic. Creepy Clown Girl is another one. She's really involved in that community too. She tends to try to bring people together for collaborations. There's one Spook Central Station is a YouTube one. That's unique because it's an Australian woman that's doing it, and it's just really cool to hear paranormal stuff from like that kind of accent. And then you got like paranormal podcasts, like Spooky Tales, Ladies Fright. Those are two fantastic ones. God, I'm going to leave people out, and I'm going to feel so bad.
It's okay. Yeah, I mean, when I ask these questions, just want us at the top. It's not an award show. It's just what's that right at the top of the head? Yeah, because I know how that is. Like as soon as you get done, you realize like something you really love you left out. But
yeah,
I'm the nature of the question.
I'm going to get all these things on Twitter. Oh, so you just like those two, really, guys?
Yeah, I mean, the value of like at least like just kind of listing a few people that kind of immediately come to mind is just like, we forget what we know and what people don't know. Like for all we know, someone listening, this is the first time they've heard of those folks and they are currently Googling them, and that could be incredibly valuable, like that gift, giving them that gift of these people exist.
It's true. And that's why I feel bad when I leave people out.
Yeah.
Well, you said it's not an award show. Like, okay, well, first I'd like to give it up to my aunt and my uncle.
Well, so for your show, if people want to learn more about you and your work, where should they go?
Well, they can find me on YouTube with Slaughterhouse Stories. They can search up the Slaughterhouse Stories podcast on like pretty much every podcast site. Like I just got on iHeartRadio. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Ice Demon. And then, anyone listening, if they want to write into my show, they can contact me at slaughterhouseStoriesPodcast@gmail.com.
And you have like on YouTube tons of stories. So if you want to, if you go to his channel, you will have like tons of content to dig into. I've been watching them all morning. Highly recommend the stuff. It is great. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. And thank you so much for doing this creative work. It's delightful. I mean, horribly delightful.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
I'm Jason Rigden, and you have been listening to episode number 12 of the Podcast of Mystery. If you want more information about me, this show, or my guests, please visit podcastofmystery.com. If you have a guest or a topic that you would like to hear on this show, please email podofmystery@gmail.com. You can also send any feedback or comments to that same address. This audio program is copyrighted by me, Jason Rigden, in 2021, and is freely available under the Creative Commons Attribution License.